Um, change, change and transitioning. Something that is easy for some, not so much for others. I know I am not. Change is not always easy for me, even if it's for the better. And especially given so many changes that are outside of our control, constantly changing every day, adapting. It's a lot. It can be a lot. And so Jenna and I recognize that, and this is a lot of what she does as a therapist, which we'll get into. But I think just kind of taking a step back, addressing what is and how we can move through that just makes things simple, right? Because I feel like sometimes we can get into like the nitty gritty of things, and it can be really distracting when really we just have to break it down. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. From my emails that I hope, well, hopefully you all receive them if you're here, is just to start thinking about what is a life change. Doesn't even have to be a big one, but just a change or transition that you're going through right now. I would assume you all are here for a reason, because there is a change or transition that you're working through. So whatever that might be, I invite you just to keep that at the forefront of your mind, so that as we go through this, there will be discussion questions that we invite you all to share. There's going to be some writing exercises. So just keeping that at the forefront of your mind will help to kind of use this session to the best that you can. All right, so I think we have most people in by now. We have a nice full house. This is exciting. As more people come in, we'll just let them file in. But a few housekeeping rules. Well, actually, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Jill. I am the health coach here with Ama La Vida. I am also the client success and event specialist. So I get to do lots of things with Ama La Vida. And we have a slide and everything that we'll go into when we do. Or actually, let's just start doing that right now. Oh, and speak of the devil, here is Kevin. He's a little stinker. All right, let me start sharing. Go ahead, go on. Let me start sharing my screen. And then, oh, you know what? Hang on. There it is. All right. 1 second. Sharing. There we go. Maybe. Okay. Are we good? We can see. Oh, and of course. All right. Okay, here we go. Yay, technology. Oh, well, welcome everyone. So as I was saying, as I was introducing myself, my name is Jill, and I am with Ama La Vida. So Ama La Vida, we are a coaching company that helps you to love your life. So whether that is through career coaching, so we have career, leadership, life, and health. So whatever that looks like, you're transitioning into a new career, you need a new job, we've got you covered there to help you really find something that you truly love. Same thing with leadership, with life, and with health. So health is my division. So a lot of the clients that I get to work with, just helping them reevaluate and whatever their health goals are, achieve them. And there's so much going on these days. There's so many distractions besides just COVID. There's so much. And I know I have to do a better job of prioritizing my health and really focusing on that, because that without our health, there's really not much. So whatever that looks like, we are there to help you. It's in our name. Love your life. And I'm Jill. I already did a ton of talking about myself. You've already met my golden retriever, personal development junkie, food and bourbon lover, love all of that fun stuff, and born and raised Chicago. I know we have a few Chicago people here, so welcome. All right, and then shifting over to our lovely, lovely guest for today, Jenna Lancor.
Hello.
Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Jenna Lancor. I'm the founder of Head First Health, which we're exclusively online now. So exclusively online, doing coaching and counseling for millennial women who are experiencing life transitions. So that's why this is just absolutely perfect to talk about today. And then in addition to life transitions, I also treat obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety disorders, and then general stress and overwhelm. And as you can see here, I also have a golden retriever. Her name's Grace. She's 4.5 months. And for any of you who are into Enneagrams, I'm an Enneagram 7. So usually always pumped for everything. That's what that means.
I love it. I just learned mine. I'm a 2.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm just learning all about that.
It's
Curious,
a fun world.
is anyone else really into that? I'm just curious how popular it is, but I feel like it's
if you're into it, throw your number out.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and if you want, I know you kind of already introduced Head First Health, but if you wanted to.
This is just our mission to empower you to have a better relationship with yourself. We want you to optimize your potential and live a life that's really meaningful to you, one that's really value driven.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Oh, and so here's today's agenda, just really high level, super basic, right? Getting back to those basics so that we can better navigate this. So what has changed? Why is it so hard? And how can we do a better job of transitioning? So few housekeeping rules that I forgot to mention. So because I am running the screen, I can't see the chat box, but please, if you have any questions or anything throughout, any concerns, comments, please engage in the chat box, do whatever you can in the chat box. But if you have any questions at all throughout, go ahead and put them there in that chat box. And then at the end, we will have time for Q&A. So we'll save a few minutes at the end for Q&A so that we can go through all of that and make sure that all of your questions are answered. So go ahead, have fun in the chat box. I'll make sure to take a look at that at the end so that all questions are answered. All right. So just again, a few little kind of housekeeping things, logistics. This session is recorded. I know that's a popular question always. This is recorded, will be shared out after. We definitely invite you to take notes. Like I said, chat in the chat box, engage with others, have fun with it. We are going to have plenty of opportunities for discussion questions. So I definitely invite you to, take yourself off mute when we have that time, or you can share anything in the chat box. I am going to sign in from my phone, so I'll be able to read some of those. And again, just repeating that, start thinking about a life transition or some sort of change that you're going through and how you can apply that or apply this session to whatever that change is that you are going through. All right, so starting off with the big question, what is change? What is change?
Yeah.
So something that, well, Jenna, if you want, I know you had a definition in there, but change is essentially, it's super basic. It's to make or become different. Changing our state, whatever that is, the act or instance of becoming different. Especially last year, even just into this year, there's so much change is happening. There's so many just different changes. There's like the big changes that we're going through. And then there's even just the smaller ones, like the day-to-day changes in our mindset, changes in our habits. I think that with change, there's so many things that get disrupted, right? So I know, so go ahead, Jenna. I've been doing so much talking. This is your specialty. You take it away.
Well, you hit it spot on that there's so many different changes. There's like layers of change. So we can be going through something just in our mind and in our bodies, but then also in our home. And then, obviously right now collectively as a nation and as a world. So all of these little changes can feel like, oh, they're small or little, but collectively they can feel really big and daunting. So when I think of change, I like to, one, just define it, like what is it? And then the two other words I like to keep in mind, one is homeostasis. So homeostasis, the way I define it, is the balance your body and brain want to have to ensure your survival. Okay, so our body and brain are constantly trying to remain in homeostasis, remain in the status quo to ensure that we're okay. And then the other thing I think of is certainty and uncertainty. So a lot of times the reasons we don't want to make change is because of the uncertainty that that entails. So being certain of something is just knowing that it's true, you know what it's about, and then obviously uncertainty has that mystery behind it. So I'd like you all to just keep those three words: change, homeostasis, certainty, uncertainty, just keeping those three in mind as we go through this.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think just like focusing on those, I love that, focusing on those few words, you know, because I feel that there's, and I know that we'll get into this a little bit more, but you know, it's like that uncertainty and kind of just reframing the way that we look at that. I always like to say uncertainty allows for possibility, right? Like you said, it's that unknown kind of what's going to happen, you know, where are we? But that takes practice, right? Looking at, because there's so much fear behind uncertainty, right? And anxiety. And I'm sure you probably go through that, you know, with your clients too. You know, that fear of unknown.
Well, and some of us are just more okay with uncertainty than others. So there's also like a scale, and sometimes I'll give that to my clients. It's the uncertainty scale, where they just ask you a bunch of questions about uncertainty to see like, where do I fall in terms of like, maybe uncertainty is really hard for me and that's why I'm not able to make these changes. But what I just want to normalize is uncertainty is difficult for everybody. We all just fall on different lines of that spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that is I know I need that reminder, is that everyone handles change differently and uncertainty. Yeah. And some people I feel like make an entire life out of that, you know, just going by the seat of their pants, which is great. I love that. I admire that. You know, but I think just sometimes just people have at least maybe even just better experiences with it altogether. Right.
Yeah. Well, I find it ironic that I love to work with life transitions and change, because honestly, I don't like change. So, well, maybe I like this niche field because it's like really aligns with the struggles that I've had.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I'm a health coach because of all of the struggles and the challenges that I've, you know, had with health. So
yeah,
I love it. That's awesome. All right. So moving on to, so understanding what change is, right? So we've kind of had this working definition, which is a lot of just our own experience, right? Our own experiences with change, how we've dealt with it. And of course, there's positive changes. There's not so positive changes. There's changes that we invite, right? And then of course, there's changes that are completely out of our control, which tend to make things so much more challenging. So why is change so hard?
Yeah. So do you mind just going to the next slide, Jill?
Yeah.
Then we could just
all
up here. Yeah.
Slide. Yes.
So these are like the 5 reasons that I've kind of identified why change can be so difficult. And we'll go into each one of these, but as you can see, the first is transitions disrupt our identity. To change always equals loss. So it doesn't matter if it's a good change, a positive change, you will lose something when you experience a change. Third, the unfamiliarity, the uncertainty. So again, going back to that homeostasis, going back to that, our brains want to know what's around the bend. Okay, well, when there's change, there's unfamiliarity and uncertainty, and our brains will start to say, Mayday, Mayday, no, let's not make that change. Let's just stay where we are. And that leads into the fourth. So the brain automatically is hardwired to detect threat. And when we disrupt homeostasis, we are therefore having a threat now. And then lastly is the lack of conversation around change. So I know this was a big one for me when I initially had gotten engaged. You know, we all know the story around engagement. Oh, it's so exciting. It's so wonderful. And I was actually terrified. And I felt very alone in that, because no one ever talked about that when you go through a major life transition, it's normal to feel terrified. It's normal to feel scared. And because no one was talking about it, now you start to have thoughts of, there must be something wrong with me, right? If everyone is saying that change is so great and I'm not feeling that way, I must really be messed up. And so hopefully, with today's conversation, we're able to normalize that you're not alone in feeling that way. And in all actuality, that means you're actually doing something right if you're feeling that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so important. Well, one, just to have awareness around why change is difficult, right? Because knowing what to have awareness around, especially these kind of 5 highlights, helps us to know kind of what we get to work on. Like, what is there? How can we change this, right? Or how can we work through so that we're not so bogged down by stress and overwhelm and anxiety and everything to work through. I think that last part, and I know that when you and I were talking about this, that lack of conversation is such an important piece, because I feel like that goes with anything, any sort of challenge or pain, that we go through. Even for me with my eating disorder and disordered eating and body image issues and just so much stuff that was just internally going on. It's almost like it occupies so much of your time and energy that it's like you don't even think to reach outside, right? You kind of just keep it all in.
Yes.
But we know that doesn't help to keep everything in.
Exactly. Yes. That silence starts to breed that shame, and then you feel even worse for what you're feeling, and then you're just stuck. So again, us just talking about this is giving everyone permission that you don't have to stay stuck. Like, you can talk about how it's difficult. It's okay. So just to revisit some of these. So I know I just went over them quickly, but I don't know, Jill, if there's any that really strike you that you want to kind of dive into. But I do have an image here, so I can just kind of explain what this is. So this is kind of going into a little bit of the science, but I do like to discuss that because, again, like these are our bodies. Like, this is going to happen to every single human on the planet, because our brains are designed this way. So the image here, what this is showing is the structures of your brain. So in the centermost part of our brain is reptilian, that takes care of all of our basic functional needs, eat, breathe, sleep, sex, all that. Next is limbic. So the limbic system is responsible for your emotion. Fear, anxiety, these are emotions that are stored in your amygdala, which is located here in the limbic system. And then on the outside, you have the cortex. The frontal lobe, easy to remember because it's by your forehead. That's responsible for all of your cognition, thoughts, positive thinking, right? We love to use that phrase. That lives in that area. So the reason I mention this is because the part of our brain that's in the middle is going to be the strongest, right? It doesn't matter if you're a therapist. It doesn't matter if you're Tony Robbins. It doesn't matter, if you're the world's best speaker. Your brain is going to look like this, which means emotions will overrule thoughts. And so you can think a certain way, but you're still going to feel what you're going to feel. And so if we're going to try to get rid of emotions, right, we're going to try and get rid of fear. I'm going through this change. I don't want to feel fearful. Let me get rid of the fear. You're in a losing battle. So we're trying to figure out, how do we work with our fear? How do we work with our emotions when we experience a change so that we could actually make that change versus fearing that emotion, fearing that fear, and then retreating and not making that change. So with the chat box, I don't know if anyone has any questions just about that kind of part. Jill, I don't know if I was cohesive.
No, that was, I'm so glad that you explained that, because I think that's so important, especially when it comes to like so much of the work, that we do, that I do with my clients, is getting a better understanding of our emotions. And so there's this tool that I always use. It's TFAR, which is our thoughts trigger our feelings influence our actions, and our actions is what creates our results, right? And so it's just this kind of this process, right? This continual, moving through that. But it's so interesting when you said that our emotions are still going to be stronger than that, because that's what kind of is overpowering. And that's what we almost observe first, at least for me.
Yeah.
I feel like, yes, my thoughts, like if I am like sitting and I'm just not feeling great about myself, right, then I know through training and practice, where are my thoughts? But it's not always easy to recognize our bully thoughts or our self-deprecating thoughts or whatever it might be. But we definitely recognize if we're feeling anxious, or if we're feeling stressed, or if we're feeling sad. We notice that first. At least I feel like maybe not notice it first, but it's more obvious, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's so interesting how explaining this like this comes to life like that.
Well, and the reason it's more obvious, right, is obviously because it's in the middle of the brain, so it's going to be stronger, it's going to overrule, and that's evolution, right? Like, oh no, nothing's dangerous behind that bush, and then a tiger jumps out, right? So like your emotions have to come in to tell you like something, it has to override the thought. But also, to this point of homeostasis, right? So if you're thirsty, you're going to drink water. If you're hungry, you're going to eat food to kind of maintain balance. Well, emotions are the thing that start having that threat, like something's wrong. So then our body says, okay, let's maintain homeostasis. Let's not do the new thing. Okay. Now the new thing could be as simple as going to the gym today, right? Like, I'm going to go do a half-hour workout on Zoom, whatever. Like, your brain will actually stop you from doing that, because there's more uncertainty to step outside your door than there is to stay in your room. And that's why sometimes it can be so hard to even get ourselves to do something as simple, I put it in quotes, as simple as go to the gym, because homeostasis gets disrupted. So it could really be something that small that our brain starts to kick up.
Yeah. That's so, yes. And I think that's such a important reminder. Even when I said earlier, I started to say, think of a big life change or transition that you're going through right now, but it doesn't have to be big at all. It could be, I'm just trying to create a new habit, a healthier habit, right? And recognizing that doing some of those things, we do a really great job of convincing ourselves not to do that. But now I better understand why it's so easy. It's so much easier to convince ourselves not to do that, because even if it's change for the better, it's still change, and our brain's still going to detect that as, whoa. Maybe we should just stay in that comfort zone. Let's just go back to that comfort zone, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I actually named my business Head First is because that's, one, I prioritize mental health, so that comes first. But two, because I had to convince myself to just dive in. Like, you just have to dive in, because you're never going to feel ready. So even though I'm terrified, I'm scared to start my own business, I'm scared to go on my own, like, well, you better go head first, because that's the only way you're going to do it.
Yeah. I love that.
So
Yeah. And I think and it's fine. I just read this somewhere where it's like, ready is an action. Ready is not an emotion. So when you feel ready, it's not feeling, right? It's maybe feeling confident, or maybe feeling something else, but like ready is an action. So I thought that was always interesting. Yeah, because you can wait until you feel ready, but you're never going to feel ready. So you just have to take the action.
You're never going to feel ready.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I think we touched upon all the first one. Okay, so let's see. So we discussed the conversation around it, the unfamiliarity, and we touched a bit on change always equals loss, right? And again, I think that's very strange. Most people don't realize that even if you're leaving, a situation that you would say is unhealthy for you, right? Even if you're like, oh, I'm on to bigger and better things, I can't wait to leave that job. Okay, but you're still experiencing loss, and loss still hurts, and you still may miss things about that, even if you're moving on to bigger and better things.
Yes.
So again, change sometimes can feel like a death. And that's what number one is all about. Transitions disrupt our identity and kind of cause what we would call an ego death, where you really have to now start to question, who are you without these things in your life. So I'm not sure if you want to speak upon that a little more, but I have tons I could say about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's such an important thing, because that's something that I didn't really realize. I didn't have a name for it, right? That it was like grieving a loss of something. So, and I think, I mean, of course, I immediately think like past relationships, really unhealthy relationships, toxic relationships that I've been in. And it's like getting out of that, I know it's for the better, but it's still, especially if that person's been with you, it's kind of, it's part of you, right? Or same thing with a job, having jobs. I know that careers become so part of our identities. And even if it's a toxic job and moving on, it's like those like confronting emotions where it's like excitement, but then it's just like, why do I feel so bummed about leaving? I'm leaving, like crap. And then we kind of start making excuses for ourselves. And then we're just like, oh, well, maybe this moving out, maybe moving on isn't really a good thing. And there you go. We do a really good job of convincing ourselves and talking ourselves back into that comfort zone, right?
Back into that homeostasis.
Oh yeah. It's a good thing. But I think in terms of like wanting to make change or change your life, it's kind of pushing outside that comfort zone. But I'm curious, has anyone else ever observed, so this is a group chat, feel free to put in the chat, but has anyone else ever looked at change kind of in that way of whether it's like feeling a loss or, feeling that it's like disrupt your identity? Because I know any sort of change for me always triggers some sort of anxiety or stress or overwhelm. But I'm curious, now that we've kind of talked about these different, different ways of experiences of why change is difficult, I'm curious for the group, has anyone ever, experienced this before, or just been aware like, I am losing a part of my identity? And if not, of course, it's totally fine, because some of this is very new for me, but I'm just curious kind of where everyone is at and how they experience change. So you can feel free to put that in the chat box. Ooh, so Shanti, absolutely. I left a job that I loved for 9 years and I'm still grieving, though it was the right decision. Yeah, that's really hard.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, right? Like, so even, it sounds like you already have the awareness that this is the right thing for me, right? This something aligns with making this decision. This aligns with my values, or this is just, I know it's time to go. And, right. And it could still be really hard to leave. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be, well, I left it, let me never think about it again. I could think about my life and grieve and be sad, and also be glad that I'm gone and glad that I have a different job. So I love that you highlight both can be true.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots, like, yes, loss is a huge part of change. The book Necessary Losses is really helpful in explaining. Awesome. Thanks, Erin, for sharing that. Yeah, loss. Yeah, that, and it's so interesting that I thank you all for sharing this, that, loss, because that's something I never observed about change. I never recognized or acknowledged, oh, I'm losing something. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Erin, a great question, which is what we're going to get to in next, promise. So why do we think about loss of change for years after? How do you get to your new homeostasis? Ooh, that is awesome. So we have some action steps, but this is good. Please keep sharing, because these are really, really amazing.
I want to answer all these questions. I'm like,
I know, but so Jenna, maybe talking to, so why do we why do we think about loss
Yeah.
of
Well,
change after years later?
I mean, so if you think about it, like if you were to lose a loved one, like you wouldn't be surprised if you thought about them years later. Like maybe you don't think about them every day, or maybe you do, but I'm sure you probably think about them on their birthday. I'm sure you think about them during the holidays or on the anniversary of their passing, because they matter to you, right? So usually when we're grieving, it's pointing towards something that matters. And that right there, it's what's hard is that our loss and our grief are one side of the coin, and on the exact same coin on the other side are our values and what matters to us. And so if you want to live a value driven meaningful life, you have to realize that on the other side of that can be a lot of pain. And a lot of people decide, I don't want to feel that pain, so I'm not going to live a value driven meaningful life. And then they feel lost because they're like,
Mm,
what kind of right, what kind of life am I feeling? I'm just numbed out now, right? Turning to substances and things that can numb you out too.
yeah.
um so the real question is, how am I, what is the story I tell myself about these emotions, about the loss, right? Because again, if somebody mentioned someone that passed, they'd be like, oh, it's totally normal that you feel sad about that. But if we mention, let's see, well, Erin, you didn't mention the loss that you experienced, but let's say loss of job, loss of ex partner, moving to a new city. Like, it's okay to also talk about how that still hurts years later.
Yeah.
It's okay to still say it hurts,
Yeah.
um, versus trying to get rid of the hurt permanently. Again,
Right.
if you look at the brain, that's not going to work. You're not going to get rid of the pain permanently. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah. I think that, yeah, absolutely. Some of these are they're really good. Brooke, oh my gosh, yes, this is something that I work on with my body confidence clients. Trying to eat healthy always feels like a loss of favorite foods. Oh my gosh, unpacking that actually could be an entire webinar topic. So I might
mhm.
make a note for that. But yeah, anything personal, even personal like that. And then another, oh my gosh, I love all of the errands we have on today. Even moving in with a partner can feel like a loss of individuality, freedom, a certain identity.
Completely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Completely. Yeah, and that's where I was, right? I identified, so this is number one, transitions disrupt our identity. So there's something in acceptance and commitment therapy called self as context. I'm not going to go into it, but essentially what it is what you strongly identify with, okay? So an example for myself is, here I am, Jenna Quinn, okay, that was my maiden name, and I strongly identify with being like a single or unmarried, let's say, individual, like just gung ho and taking the bull by its horns kind of person. Okay, so that's my identity. And when I got engaged, I didn't know what the hell that even meant to be. I didn't know what that was. Like, that didn't fit my identity. So it caused a lot of difficulties inside, because I now had to grieve what it meant to be, single in the world of marriage, right? You're single when you fill out your taxes, to go from that to, oh gosh, now I'm going to be married. So that's exactly it. Like, if you identify as, I am a New Yorker, I live a fast-paced lifestyle. Okay, well, now you move to the burbs, somewhere. I mean, Chicago's paced, but like, who am I? Like, who am I if I'm not these things? So what self as context is all about in this type of therapy is challenging yourself to identify with something that can never be lost, right?
Mm,
That can never be taken away.
hmm.
Can you find a part within yourself? It's usually like an essence, and some people may give it certain names, right? But an essence inside of yourself that, if everything changed, that would remain. And if you can identify with that part of self, that's one of the things that can help us when we experience loss of everything
Mm,
else that can change.
yeah. Ooh, I love that. I love that. Okay, awesome. So this is great. Definitely. I feel like we could stay on this slide forever, but for the
Moving
sake
on.
of time, I want to get transition into how we actually work through these things. But I will read Shanti. So Shanti, I don't feel it's necessarily binary, feeling pain or leading a value-driven, meaningful life. Otherwise, it's almost as if we become robots and don't give ourselves grace. In certain seasons, a person needs to numb out the pain to function, obviously not harming themselves or others. An example, staying away from certain triggering people or places might be needed at a certain time and point.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
completely.
Yeah. I think it's definitely but see, that's your experience, right? It's, I feel like it is experiential. It is individualistic. Honoring your values, right? Values is huge. Values is huge. We have an entire e-coaching module on just values, because that's what you said, those are also things that can't always be taken away, right? The values is, and cool thing about values is that values can change and evolve as you change and evolve, right? It's not anything that's written in stone, but to kind of Jenna's point before, your values, that's what you can use to drive your actions, right? But those are ours. Those are ours. Those are ours to hold on to. So thank you for sharing that, Shanti. I love that. I think that's a really interesting way to look at that. So thank you. And keep the comments going. I'm going to keep moving on for the sake of time, but keep the comments going. This is awesome. Okay. So again, we've kind of been touching on this, and a few people have already shared. So again, what kind of changes or transitions are you experiencing right now? Just thinking about that. I feel like you've done a good job, and we have plenty of time to think about that. But please continue to feel free to share those in the chat box.
And to write them down if you haven't written them in the journal. So write that down.
Oh yes.
Hopefully y'all have a journal. If not, grab whatever paper you have next to you, and just to write this down, because this essentially is what we're identifying as like the trigger, right? Like this is the thing that's triggering these emotions, these thoughts, these behaviors. So just give you just like a minute. I'm sure you all have already kind of brainstormed what that is for you.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, yeah, gotta.
All right, cool. So frameworks to help with transitions. These are out of order, but these are what we'll be digging into. So kind of these action steps. So to Erin's question before, so how do we kind of find our new homeostasis? How do we move through these? All right. So thoughts.
Yeah. So thoughts, emotion, behaviors, they all influence one another, all affect one another, all connected. So what that means is that we can interject at any one of these points to support, to help ourselves. So starting with thoughts. So I would like you all, so looking at, right, the trigger, again, for me, let's say it was like being engaged, getting married, like that was the transition I was going through. That was really triggering and difficult for me. What thoughts do you have about it? So again, let's just take a couple minutes and just write out all the fears, all the things that you're worried about experiencing it, or if you're about to make a change, if you're about to experience something. And then if you all can, I don't know, give like a thumbs up or something in the chat if you're all done. You
could just give a like 30 seconds or a minute. But this is also a really great practice if you want to do on your own, is just brain dumping thoughts. So thinking about this change that is going on in your life, just giving yourself that space of just being like, okay, what are all of the thoughts that are going through my head, and just getting them all down on paper. Brain dumping is also really, really helpful for that.
All right, so we have our thoughts. Now we'll move on to what do we do with those? So there are so many different things that we could begin with thoughts, right? We could look at patterns. First, we have to learn the patterns. And again, in therapy, if you work with a CBT therapist, you're probably going to go through this process. one of the things we do is we start to question these thoughts. So because of the sake of time for today, we obviously can't get through all of these, but you all will have access to the slide, right? Jill, they'll have this access to the slide indefinitely.
So no, but we can share some of the, like, these questions, like the questions and like the emotions wheel and everything. We can share those.
Gotcha. So these are some questions to kind of interrogate your thoughts with, right? Where, like, if someone knocked on your door, you didn't know, you'd probably ask them a few questions before letting them in your house. So when these thoughts come knocking on your door of your mind, perhaps asking them some of these questions before you let them in and let them stay there for a while. So it could be any one of these, like, what is the evidence that this is actually true? What is the evidence against this thought? Is this just my opinion? Could I be wrong about this? Are there examples somewhere in the world that disprove what I, would think about what would happen to me when I make this change? I love this question. Are my thoughts giving me power or taking it away?
Ooh,
that's
a
right?
big one. Wow.
And then I also like the last one. What would I tell a friend? If my friend were in this situation, like, would I give them this thought, or would I maybe switch it up a bit for them? So
yeah,
these are just
I love these
to challenge that initial thought.
Yeah, these are really powerful. I think one of the biggest things for me was remembering that our thoughts are not fact. Our thoughts are not truth. So thought pops in, we're kind of conditioned to believe that, but we don't have to. We actually have the power to not believe it, right? Asking ourselves, what is this evidence? Is there interrogate those thoughts, right? Our thoughts are not fact and our thoughts are not truth unless we make them truth, unless we believe them to be true, unless we act on them and make them true. So kind of that first stage of recognizing, just observing, where are your thoughts? Are they valid? It's a really good starting point to create that awareness. All right, and then shifting into emotions.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
My favorite. I actually have it right here with me too, somewhere. Oh, here it is. My emotion wheel.
Wheel of emotions.
In every session, I pull it out. I'm like, what are you feeling? So emotions it's important to identify what we're feeling, because, to think of, if any of you have kids, I don't, but, if you have one child that's screaming and that is angry, and you have another child that is crying and is in the corner, you're going to handle those two children differently. So it's really important to know if you're actually feeling angry versus if you're just feeling really sad. And if you can get clear on what you're feeling, you now have the awareness to treat yourself in a way that can be most conducive and helpful to soothing that emotion. So taking a look at this wheel, you have your life transition written down, you have your thoughts written down. What feelings pop out at you with this transition that you're experiencing?
Ton. Ha. LOL. I didn't know that there was that many to be on a wheel. Yeah. That's so true. That's what I said the first time I saw this emotion, this wheel of emotions. I don't know if that's what it's called, but I feel like it's fun to say wheel of emotions. So true. Cause it's recognizing that there's so many. It kind of, at least for me, impacted me in the way of like, holy cow, my stories around some of these emotions that I more regularly feel, that's kind of, I need some work around that, because there's certain things I might be feeling where I might be feeling sad, but I misinterpret it as, anger or even just like confusion. And then I go about it the wrong way and and it makes it a little bit more challenging to navigate that. But again, that having that awareness and around like, oh, So maybe it wasn't necessarily jealousy. Maybe I was just feeling heard about something, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
I just love this as kind of as almost like an emotional playground. Like take a look at
Yeah.
these, see like, because again, it's just going back to those stories of what are the stories that we're telling ourselves? What if we are just like, that's all right. I'm just experiencing this. I'm not a mad person. I'm not a jealous person. I'm not an angry person. I'm just experiencing this emotion
Mhm.
right now.
Completely. Completely. And again, this, I mean, I've been doing this for years. I do it every day. And I still, at times, if I'm really wrapped up into something, I still don't have the awareness of what's actually going on. And I did it just the
Yes.
other day. I thought that I was angry, and I wasn't angry. I was actually feeling helpless. And because I didn't know how to deal with helplessness, instead I turned it into anger because anger is easier to cope with, right? Like, at least in my
Mm.
experience, and most of ours, we value anger more in our world. Um, and so I couldn't help myself because I wasn't targeting the right one, the right emotion. So this is huge. Emotional intelligence, EQ, is a great thing to keep brushing up on.
Yeah, I love that. Amazing. All
Okay.
right. Good old behaviors.
Behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, so behaviors are all the things you do. So when you have the transition, you have the thoughts, you have the emotions, now you're going to start to behave in a certain way. So if I'm feeling angry or irritable, I might scream. I might drive 30 miles past the speed limit. You might do certain behaviors. So again, just taking a minute right now as we talk through this to just write out, what are my behaviors? Do I avoid? Do I numb out on my phone? Do I um, ask for reassurance? That's a huge one. Asking
Mm.
other people for permission, right? Other
Ooh.
people what they think. So what are some behaviors you do when you feel roughed up?
And apologies. We didn't invite you guys, or we didn't give time to write out the emotions, but if you want to take time, we'll send out that emotions wheel if you want to also just take a moment to kind of write down the emotions that you're feeling around this change as well. But yeah, I think another thing to remember about behaviors is there's the choice of taking action, but then remembering that inaction or not taking action is still a behavior, right? That's still a choice that we're making to. So that's something that I have to remember too, is it's always like, well, I don't really know if I don't really know what action I'm taking. I'm like, oh, well, not doing anything about my anger or my anxiety is still it's still an action, still something
Exactly.
that we have to be aware that this choice, this behavior is going to create kind of like that T-FAR model I mentioned before. Thoughts, feelings, actions, results. These actions or inaction is going to create this result.
Yeah.
So just having awareness around that, it's really important.
So the two last things that I'll discuss before we get everyone's questions is, I just want to touch upon a little bit. We touched upon, like, with thoughts, when you're starting to feel your thoughts are racing, you do that brain dump, you write it all down, and then you ask yourself those questions. So the tool, right? Like, what's the tool? What's the thing I do? I ask myself those questions about, a couple of those thoughts. All right. So that's for thoughts. Now with behaviors, and I'll touch back on emotions in a second, but for behaviors, when we talked about that homeostasis, right? When we talked about, like, our brain doesn't know what's around the corner, something as small as going to the gym, or even now, like, not even going to the gym, just turning on, whatever app you're using. Um, you have to give your brain as much certainty as you can. So this is about, like, SMART goals, essentially. So if you say, I want to lose weight, like, your brain has no idea what that means. It has no idea what that looks like. So you have to paint a very specific picture for your brain, right? I'm not going to the gym. I am going to my closet I'm grabbing my outfit out of the second drawer and I'm going to put that shirt on my body. Right? My brain goes, oh, I know what that looks like. And there's no tigers or bears lurking around that corner. So yeah, we could do it. We can do it. And then I just do that. And then, right. So the more specific you can get with what you're trying to do, the greater likelihood is that you're actually going to feel safe enough, homeostasis enough to then take that step.
So important. Yeah, I love that. Much needed. It's like creating those like frictionless steps, right?
Yes.
Like eliminating that decision making or that negotiation process of, if I want to wake up and build that habit of, let's say, working out in the mornings, remove that change, right? Remove those threats, put your clothes out. So then your brain is like, oh, clothes, I just have to put those on. I know how to do that. Next thing you know, you're ready and you're on your mat, you're ready to go.
Exactly.
So I love that. Yeah.
And
Again,
then just
go ahead.
touching with emotions, just so I can leave y'all with a little piece there. So emotions, again, this is can be difficult, but we want to figure out how to soothe our emotions, to tell ourselves it's okay to feel this way, right? So I use the analogy with children because it's really helpful to see that, right? So like if you have a child who's screaming or crying and you start yelling at that kid, stop it, stop feeling that, stop doing that, stop thinking that. What's going to happen to that child, right? They're going to elevate whatever behavior they're doing, it's going to increase. Versus if you're like, it's okay that you're feeling this way, right? It's okay that you're sad. You cry in this corner for as long as you need to cry. You feel sad for as long as you need to feel sad. But we're leaving, right? You don't just get to hang out in Target and cry. You can cry, but we're going to walk out of Target. So it's the same for ourselves. It's okay to feel scared. You're going to make the call anyway. It's okay to be terrified. You're going to start the business. It's okay to be sad about your ex. You're not taking his call. But you're not going to try to get the emotion to change.
Yeah. Thank you for circling back to that, because I think that's really important, is removing that trying to like force emotions or trying to fix them or trying to, trying to like force happiness or force confidence or force anything. It doesn't work. It just creates so much more anxiety in us. So being able just to like be with those emotions, to let them process, and then consciously choosing, how am I going to respond now?
Yeah.
Behaviors. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So as we're starting to conclude this conversation, because I want to give ourselves, we're kind of up at time, but if we do have any questions, actually really quick before we wrap this last part up, if anyone does have any questions, you guys have been doing a phenomenal job of sharing in the chat. Love everything. But if you guys do have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Of course, if people are able to stay after for a few minutes, we'll be able to answer them, but at least so we know up front how much time we're working with. All right, so this part, kind of a group discussion, but also reflection question that we definitely invite you guys to take time to reflect on after is, who do you get to become on the other side of change, right? So this is that whole looking at things through a different lens, looking at acknowledging, what change is, creates anxiety. It's messing things up. It's with my structure, whatever that might be, looking at that as maybe a bad thing or feeling like it could be a bad thing. But who do we get to become on the other side of that? So what's, I like to say, like, with every complaint, there's an opportunity for gratitude, right? So like, what's something, how can we look at this through another lens? Who do I get to become on the other side? So what am I learning about myself? What new identity am I starting to create? What's this new homeostasis that I get to be in? So thinking about that is, kind of this more of just like a positive approach to change. So if you want, again, I know we're kind of up on time, but you know, actually I'll include this in the slides recap. We won't include all of the slides, but I'll leave some of these reflection questions for you guys to focus on. Erin, that is such a great question to ask. Yeah. It's like, who do we get to become on the other side of this? How do we get to learn? How do we get to, you know, I just, of course, think of tacky example, but just like, it's almost just like a flower. Like, who do you get to like bloom and come out of on the other side? Who do you want to become? Yeah. All right. So again, apologies for the lack of time for this. But what actions are you going to take? So if anyone wants to really quick, just share in the chat box.
Please, I'd love to hear.
Yes. What actions are you going to take from this conversation and how you've been able to apply this session to your change? And then another question, what's an affirmation or reframe that you can start telling yourself? So something that that we kind of mentioned, but like an affirmation that's going to help you move through this. So something like, I am safe. It's okay for me to feel this. This is only temporary. I'm working on becoming, you know, the best version of myself. I am in the process of, but would love, what's one action you are going to take from this?
Oh, Erin, I love that. So to not tell myself to stop, just to feel what I'm feeling. Absolutely. That you get to feel it and that you, beautiful. I love that.
God's got this.
Yes.
I love that, Sarah.
Sarah, you're right. So this is exactly right when we're talking about that inner essence that we mentioned. You know, some people identify that as, some people like to call it an inner essence. Some people like to call it their values. Some people like to call it God. Some call it spirit. Some call it high vibe. Whatever you want to say, you know, for you to say that, like, yeah, God's got this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that's something that is recognizing that there are things that are out of our control, right? That the only thing that we can actually control, as much as we like to think we can control other things and other people, we just can't. But just like reminding ourselves that we can only focus on ourselves. Ooh, fear of failure. That is a good one. A lot of my fears are unfounded and irrational. I'm going to start interrogating them. Yes. Giving yourself that permission. Just ask. I don't have to believe this thought. I don't. Of course, that's much easier said than done, but it's absolutely possible. I love that.
So I tend to tell myself, so Shanti says, I tend to tell myself that I'm bad with change. Even as a kid, I liked a lot of structure and certainty. I could reframe change as a skill that I continue to work on and become more comfortable with. Yes, exactly. So it's a skill. We become better by practicing.
Yes.
Right? Not that I'm bad at lifting weights. I just go to the gym, lift more weights, and before you know it, wow, I'm actually pretty good at lifting weights. So to re-identify with a different story, to tell yourself a different story. You know, not I am bad with change, but I'm a human. Humans struggle with change, and I'm learning. I'm practicing.
Yes, I am learning. I love that. Amazing. Well, please keep sharing anything else that comes up for you guys. And this is, we'll share these as well in the follow-up email recap, how to stay in touch with me and with Jenna as well. So I'll make sure to include that in the slides so that you guys have that information. Here's how to stay in touch with her, Head First Health. Like I said, I'll make sure to include that.
Yes, and I'll actually be, oh wait, you just drop it?
Oops.
So I could actually text, I could chat, put in this box too. So on my Instagram, Head First Health CC, I am going to do like a follow-up today. So if anyone wants to pop on, I could be answering some questions there as well later today if that is something that you all want to join. So like I said, it's Head First Health CC, and you'd be able to see me there.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll have I feel like with slides, I always include links, like people can click through their screen and click on them, but you can't. So we'll make sure to put all of those links and everything in the follow-up email, and additional resources, anything like that. And we'll make sure to include that. A few of those slides, screen grabs, so that you guys have those questions and that very fun wheel of emotions. I'm just going to keep saying that, just wheel of
I love it.
emotions. I'm feeling a wheel of emotions today, right?
Oh, that's great.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for sticking around. We really appreciate your time and your energy and your engagement, and really
Yeah.
just your vulnerability and sharing this. You guys are
I
awesome for
love, yes.
sharing.
Thank you so much.
And as with our follow-up email, Jenna is copied on that. I am on that. So if you guys have any additional questions that come up, I know today it's a lot, especially when we
Mhm.
talk about thoughts, feelings, emotions, all this. So
Woo!
when you give yourself time to just let it all decompress and digest, if anything comes up for you, please, please reply to that email. We're behind that. And so we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Awesome.
Have a beautiful week.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.